taking a probiotic. That's not a fix. That's a Band-Aid approach, just a more natural Band-Aid approach. The goal is to find where the imbalance is and correct that. And so feeding the good guys, eliminating the bad guys. And that's what we discuss in our 6R protocol of gut healing. And so using things like prebiotics, anti-inflammatory foods, but in particular lifestyle factors, reducing stress, optimizing sleep. Because when we can rebuild that gut ecosystem, we don't just eliminate symptoms, but your biology begins to recalibrate. And this is how you start to unravel and undo these negative changes and symptoms that you've had.
Welcome to Health Decoded, your number one source for real health information, with your hosts, Dr. Alessi and Matt Tack.
Welcome back to another episode of the Health Decoded podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Alessi. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on one of the most powerful diagnostic tools in modern functional medicine, what we call the deep gut scan. And you can see already, I have a report here pulled up on my screen if you're watching this. If not, I highly recommend you do watch this. It's a very informative report here. Basically, I'm going to be going through a sample of this deep gut scan report that we use in clinical practice to help uncover what is going on under the hood, if you will. And so in this episode, I'm going to take you inside what this report is. We'll go through section by section together so you can see exactly what we look for when we're identifying what we call root causes of dysfunction and not just chasing symptoms. Things like joint pain, energy, mood, hormones, and your immune system are all linked to your gut. We've talked about this in previous episodes. In fact, last episode was a very good episode that we relaunched, talking just about this. And so you're going to learn really how we uncover the hidden imbalances and how most conventional testing actually misses these things, like gut dysbiosis, low bacterial diversity, leaky gut, and inflammatory toxins that can then trigger everything from fatigue to autoimmune disease. So by the end of this episode, you will understand why I say this is the best test and really why it's become a cornerstone for nearly every patient we see at Alessi Functional Health. Because when you fix the gut, you are fixing the foundation. So let's get right into this. Let's start with what you're looking at here is basically the overview. And so page 1 is a summary. So you basically get a summary when you take this test of your results. And so it's what we call like a bird's eye view, or your gut health snapshot, right? So it basically gives you a gut health score. Everybody went to school. We all understand that you get a grading system, right? And you want to be closer to that 100 to get a good grade. And so you can see here, it gives you an overall gut health score based on all the different metrics that we are going to dive into here shortly. And so the two key scores we're looking at is number 1, your diversity score, and then also, again, the gut health score. Now, the diversity score tells us how rich your ecosystem is, how many species of bacteria are living and working together in your gut. Think of it like an Amazon rainforest where the more species that coexist, the healthier and more resilient the system will be. But when diversity stops, when we start losing certain species due to stress, antibiotic use, poor diet, or toxicity, the ecosystem can become fragile. Similar to like when a species of animal goes extinct, it can affect the entire ecosystem in that area. And so there was a study in 2021 published in Nature Microbiology that found reduced microbial diversity was linked to everything from metabolic syndrome and autoimmune disease. And in that study, they also found that this related to things like neurodegenerative disorders like Alzheimer's disease. So this number right here, and this is, again, on your report, it's not just a data point. This is a reflection of your biological resilience. And then the gut health score is combining metrics from multiple categories, like I said, microbial balance, how much beneficial versus harmful species you have in your body, inflammation markers, and overall functionality of your gut. In the clinic, we like to see this number in the 80s. I prefer 85 or above. A score below 70 tells us the gut is struggling severely, whether that's an infection, poor digestion, or again, imbalance in the bacterial terrain. And so we can see here this 78, I mean, that's definitely suboptimal. It's under 80. And so we would take attention to what things need work. Now, if you see a score like this, it doesn't mean that you're broken, you're dying, right? It's not the end of the world, but it means that your gut has something going on and it's asking for some attention. And so the perspective I always give my patients, conventional medicine is going to wait for this score to be bad enough that you have severe issues. But with functional medicine, as we know, we talk about on the podcast all the time, this lets us get a gauge of where you are to get ahead of problems before they possibly become worse. And so let's get into some of these things on the next few pages here. I'm going to get into more of the detail that I think some people are going to appreciate. Some people, this might be more than you care to look at. Either way, going to get into this. And so, this section here is what we call the good guys. These are probiotic and commensal bacteria. And so these are what I like to call like the guardians of your gut, your beneficial bacteria. They're probiotic and commensal species that keep inflammation low and your digestion strong. And so your immune system is also calm and balanced because of that. When these microbes are thriving, you will feel it. Your digestion is smooth. You don't have those loose or constipated stools. You feel more normal, right? You are more regimented. But when they're depleted, you can start to feel symptoms. You can start to feel things unravel. And so let's get into what are like some of the power players here, okay? And so if you're looking at the screen, obviously I will be talking about this if you're not watching, but if you are watching, we're going to go through this list here. And so the bifidobacterium and the lactobacilli, these are like your frontline probiotics. They're going to support digestion, produce vitamins like B12, K2, and they help to kind of crowd out pathogens. Low levels of these often correlate with things like constipation, bloating, or a tendency towards like food sensitivities. Now, when we see these like Faecobacterium parusanitzii, one of the single most important anti-inflammatory bacteria in the human gut. And so it produces something called butyrate, which is a short-chain fatty acid that actually heals your gut lining and fuels your colon cells. There was a 2021 study in Cell Host and Microbe Journal found that low Faecobacterium levels were strongly associated with Crohn's, depression, and obesity. Now, let's keep going here. Let's look at some more. Now, when we get here in this next page, Rosaburia, another butyrate producer, it actually stabilizes your gut barrier. When this is low or missing, we often see leaky gut, or we can correlate leaky gut because the intestinal wall is becoming more porous. And then we get into things like Akkermansia. Sorry about that. The Akkermansia. So Akkermansia muciniphila, I always tell patients this one's like your intestinal housekeeper. It will strengthen the gut, the mucus lining, improves your insulin sensitivity. And low Akkermansia often shows up in patients with obesity, type 2 diabetes, or any type of like autoimmune, specifically thyroid disease. Now, if you look at this sample report clinically, what does this mean? You'll notice some of these species are flagged as below optimal. Some are low, some are fine, right? And so again, it's a clue. This is not a diagnosis, but it's a map of showing us where your gut ecosystem is and where it's out of balance. Again, we are base level here. We're at the foundation of like these things then can determine a diagnosis, right? And so when the good guys are low, the gut is going to lose its natural defense system. That's where opportunistic bacteria, yeast, and toxins can start taking over. It's like firing half the security team in a busy city. The chaos will come, right? Defund the police. You start getting rid of these things, the chaos will come. And so this is where functional medicine goes beyond, right? Taking a probiotic. That's not a fix. That's a Band-Aid approach, just a more natural Band-Aid approach. The goal is to find where the imbalance is and correct that. And so feeding the good guys, eliminating the bad guys. And that's what we discuss in our 6R protocol of gut healing. And so using things like prebiotics, anti-inflammatory foods, but in particular lifestyle factors, reducing stress, optimizing sleep. Because when we can rebuild that gut ecosystem, we don't just eliminate symptoms, but your biology begins to recalibrate. And this is how you start to unravel and undo these negative changes and symptoms that you've had. And so this section of the deep gut scan tells us exactly where to start with that rebuilding process. Now, let's get into what we call like the bad guys, right? Pathobionts, pathogens. Again, here are more commensals. Let me scroll down here. So now you're seeing what we call, again, these pathobionts. And these reports are great because as a non-doctor, somebody reading this can still understand a bit of what's going on. And so these pathogens or these overgrowths, these are opportunistic bacteria that start to crowd out and eliminate some of the good bacteria. And then these can begin to create, again, dysfunction and then thus symptoms coming from that. And so, every gut should have some of these, right? It's not that you have, it's not if these are present, it's how much and whether or not your beneficial microbes are keeping them in check. And so again, that goes back to the balance thing. Now, what we're looking at, and again, we'll get a little myopic here, but I'm not going to go too crazy with detail, but looking at things like Klebsiella, Enterobacter, when we're looking at Citrobacter, these are pathobionts that can trigger bloating, fatigue, inflammation, often tied to autoimmune conditions, things like AS, rheumatoid arthritis, more joint-based. So if someone has those types of things and they have joint pain, chronic rheumatoid pain, they've often not checked the gut if you've gone with Western conventional medicine route, and they put you on some type of medication, which can actually cause toxicity to the gut, making this worse. And that's where people get frustrated. People get burnt out on doing the same thing with no change. And so there was a study in Clinical and Experimental Immunology 2020 showed that molecular mimicry from Klebsiella species can actually trigger autoimmune flares. Molecular mimicry is when your body thinks one thing is something else. And so your cells or your immune system starts to attack itself rather than this bacteria. And so it can be very dangerous, and it can lead to a lot of really, harmful and long-term symptoms as well. And so, again, this report shows, if you're watching on the screen, more of these pathobionts and pathogenic bacteria. And so, again, you can see how it shows you very cleanly, you're in the green or you're in the red. Now we know where we need to focus. Other things that we would look for are things like Clostridium species, which some of them are good, some are bad. Candida, which is a common fungal overgrowth that we see, thrives when good bacteria gets depleted. So if somebody uses antibiotics a lot, they often can get this then Candida overgrowth, which is like a yeast. And so the way we read these, again, is not that, every one of these needs to be eliminated completely. It's that they need to be within a relative abundance, meaning that there needs to be a certain level, but not an overabundance. And so the term dysbiosis, if you're not familiar, or I've said that and you're like, what is that? It's basically where dys meaning, dysfunctional, and then biosis with the bacteria. So there is an imbalance in that. And so it is linked to things like leaky gut, food sensitivities, anxiety, depression, chronic fatigue, or even skin issues like eczema or acne. And there was a journal that said in Nature Communications Journal 2021 found that dysbiotic microbiomes in adults were correlated with elevated CRP, which is C-reactive protein, and interleukin-6, which are two major inflammatory markers that drive metabolic and cardiovascular disease. And so, again, we need to understand not just, okay, what do we need to focus symptom-wise, but what's under the hood, what's at the deep level that is then leading to a downstream causing symptoms. Because if these organisms are producing toxins, that's creating inflammation. That's then hijacking your nutrient absorption, your gut's ability to digest and process and absorb nutrients. That leads to a problem down the road as well. And so when these bad guys are dominating, then your gut turns from, a garden, a healthy ecosystem, into more of a battleground where things are attacking each other. It's very inflamed, and that's where the symptoms kick in. So now that we've seen the good guys, the bad guys, this test does go deeper. I'd like to touch on, if you're following on the screen, this is where it gets pretty cool. What we call like the leaky gut and the functional restoration piece. And so as we get into this, again, let's scroll here. Actually, real quickly, this is cool. And this, I didn't have this set to talk on, but this is great. So essentially what we did with this test was we were able to combine our two most popular tests that we use. One is a parasite gut stool test, and then the other was what's called an OAT test, or an organic acids test. This tests both of those. However, we're able to save our patients a ton of money by doing it in one test as well. So a lot of time saved, a lot of money saved, and able to make this a little bit more accessible and affordable for people. And so it's definitely helped us to help more people and more people to learn about what's going on in their body. That was just an aside there. And so again, when we get into some of these leaky gut markers, what we're looking at is three things really. One is what we call zonulin. And so we're going to go back up to here. So now let's get into some of these things we look towards that are going to tell us what is the health of your actual gut lining, the gut barrier, how your body is being affected by this dysfunctional bacteria, if that is going on. And so a lot of these markers get a very nitty gritty, but it's also very helpful for us as providers to be able to see this, to know what things need attention. And so before we get into this real quick, let's take a word from one of our sponsors. Hey, Health Decoded listeners, I'd like to share a story with you. There was this man who on the outside looked healthy, like he had everything going right. He was fit, he worked out, he ate clean, but beneath the surface, even unknown to him, his body was breaking down until one day he crashed. Full-blown fatigue, burnout, he couldn't even think or make it through the day without a nap. After finally turning to functional medicine blood work and discovering he had an autoimmune thyroid condition caused by leaky gut, he was able to take action and restore his health. Well, guess what? That person was me. And that's what led me to tirelessly work toward creating an option for people who wanted a way out. The result was my 6R gut healing protocol. Backed by advanced functional testing, this system uncovers the root of dysfunction and uses a step-by-step formula proven to restore, rebalance, and completely heal the gut. We only open this program to a select number of patients each month. So if you're ready to finally take control of your gut health, visit alessifunctionalhealth.com/gut and take the quiz to see if you qualify for this program. I look forward to seeing you soon. All right, welcome back. Thank you for that. Now let's get into this. Okay, so again, the three markers we're going to look for when it comes to figuring out whether you have confirmed leaky gut or what's going on with the gut lining. Number one is called zonulin. This is basically the protein that controls the tight junctions between your intestinal cells. Think of your lining of your gut like a fence that has metal bars, and zonulin being the pieces that hold those together. When it gets affected, those start to open wider. Now, more things can leak into the gut, into the bloodstream, and it becomes more porous, allowing things like toxins, food particles, bacteria to now leak into your bloodstream. And that's what we call leaky gut or intestinal permeability. And so a journal in Frontiers in Immunology 2020 linked elevated zonulin with autoimmune thyroid disease, celiac disease, metabolic syndrome. And we have seen this. I mean, it's 10 out of 10 times in our office, somebody comes in with thyroid autoimmunity that's been confirmed with blood work. We test the gut and we find zonulin is out of control, leaky gut. And now we know, hey, all the thyroid meds in the world are not going to fix this. We need to fix your gut. Another marker is something called calprotectin, an inflammatory protein released by neutrophils, which are white blood cells. High levels here point to active gut inflammation, sometimes even like early inflammatory bowel disease like Crohn's or ulcerative colitis. And then the third one is secretory IgA, immunoglobulin A. It's your gut's first line of immune defense, basically like an antibody shield in your intestinal wall. When this is low, your immune system is burned out and overwhelmed. And when it's high, it's fighting something. So either way, high or low, it gives us data, it gives us insight. Some of the other digestive function markers are things like these metabolites, right? And so these are able to tell us how well you're actually digesting and absorbing food. Is your body processing these things? Pancreatic elastase tells us how strong your digestive enzyme output is. If it's low, then you're not breaking down proteins and fats efficiently. Beta glucuronidase helps us understand detox and hormone recirculation. When it's too high, your body is reabsorbing toxins and used estrogen instead of eliminating them. And this is where then downstream hormonal imbalances can occur. And so those short chain fatty acids like butyrate, acetate, and propionate, these are basically your gut's anti-inflammatory currency. Low levels of these mean beneficial bacteria aren't producing enough fuel for your colonic cells. There was a study in the American Journal of Gastroenterology 2022 found that low butyrate producing bacteria directly correlate with metabolic inflammation and impaired insulin sensitivity, or metabolic syndrome diabetes, prediabetes. And so when you connecting the dots here, when you combine inflammation, leaky gut, low short chain fatty acids, and weak digestion, you get this perfect storm as to why people have so many chronic conditions. And this is why we use this deep gut scan. It's not just to find what's wrong, but the design is actually how to fix it. And this is a really cool test because I'm going to show you now in this next part. It basically takes all of, and obviously there's, the doctor's view of this too comes into effect, but it takes all of that analysis that it did, and it makes recommendations as to what bacteria we should be using, right? Should we increase this, reduce this? What species need help or assistance? It also makes recommendations on what foods to eat more of, what foods to avoid, certain probiotics or supplements that you can use. It also recommends lifestyle changes like diet type, increasing fiber, maybe going ketogenic based on some of these bacterial trends. And again, the test itself is never going to eliminate the conscious mind of a doctor. However, it can help to provide some insight for the doctor to then make more specialized and personalized recommendations for the patient. And so, an example is like ketogenic diet is going to enhance neurovascular function and improve Akkermansia levels, which we talked about earlier is a key anti-inflammatory species in your gut. And so, the other thing is that I love about this test is if you want, there are a million sources in here for different references to probiotics and what they do, foods and how they affect the gut, supplements, and even like prebiotics and lifestyle changes. So many studies went into creating this amazing test. That's why we've decided to use it within our clinic to get amazing results with our patients. And now, again, what the test does is it gives us data. This is one of our core tools to get insight as to what is going on. And then from there, what do? And that's where we can personalize with functional medicine a plan to help someone get from inflamed, leaky gut, poor digestion, hormone imbalance, back to vibrant, full health, energy levels, and mood. And so I always like to share, if you've been chasing any of these symptoms, if any of this kind of rung true to you and you want to finally understand what your body's trying to tell you, this is where you'd start inside your gut. If you're interested in doing this deep gut scan and getting a personalized gut health score like you saw on this video, visit us at alessifunctionalhealth.com/gut. You can start by taking that 2-minute quiz. Be sure to include that you heard about this on the podcast, and you'll get an exclusive discount on your test. When you fix the gut, you truly fix the foundation and everything else from there. As always, if you found value in today's show, please do like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. That's how we grow the message. That's how we change more lives and ultimately help more people to create that ripple effect and that impact outward. If you want to get in touch with us or be featured on an episode, if you're a patient who's experienced this, gone through this journey and had great results and want to share your story, please send any questions or information to ask@alessifxhealth.com. We'll be happy to share that on the show and answer those questions. Also, you can visit alessifunctionalhealth.com, sign up for the newsletter, check out our resources page, and you can learn more about our approach to nutrition, cutting-edge therapies, and functional medicine. I thank you again for tuning in to Health Decoded. I'm Dr. Alessi, and I'll see you on the next one.
Thank you for tuning in to Health Decoded, where we break down the truth about all things health and empower you to take charge of your well-being. If you found value in today's episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who needs to hear this. For more resources and personalized support, visit us at alessifunctionalhealth.com and sign up for our newsletter. To hear your questions answered live on the show, send them to ask@alessifxhealth.com. That's ask@alessifxhealth.com. Until next time, stay curious, stay empowered, and remember, your health is in your hands.